Good afternoon. Welcome to Behind the Bombers, which is your chance to meet some of the people who make our club great. Throughout the season, we'll be spotlighting a player, a coach, or a committee member, sharing their stories, their passions, and what their connection is to the Bay and Basin Bombers. It's all about celebrating our community and the heartbeat of our club, our people. I'd like to welcome our first interviewee. It's Michael Burke, who is the president of the Bay and Basin Football Club. Welcome, Michael. So the first thing I'd like to know, Michael, is tell me a bit about what you do in the real world, your occupation, and your family makeup.
Thanks again. So I am the oldest of three kids. I'm not going to tell you how old I am because it's a secret to my longevity, but family makeup is a wife and three kids at home. So oldest being 20, nearly 20, youngest being 9. So in the real world, my title is National Maintenance Manager. I work for a company called Keaton, and we own and operate 76 retirement villages to oversee the maintenance process across the country. So it takes me all over, but it's also one of those roles which allows me to continue to juggle this role.
Well, amazing. Sounds just like most people. You're a busy man outside the football world.
Yeah.
Okay, so I want to dive into a little bit more about the footy side of things. So, what first drew you to the Bay and Basin Bombers, and how did you end up as the club president?
We've got Chris Stubbs to blame for the club president piece. But how I ended up with the Bombers was my wife actually saw the Auskick advertisement for our son Chance, who's now an under 15s, training with our seniors. It came from the fact that we were looking for, I guess, to be a little bit more involved in our community. So for a number of years, I grew up in Melbourne, so AFL was sort of all we knew, and we really felt it was a good introduction to team sport, where it is more around connection and kids having fun. And yeah, my wife brought Chance along to there, and the rest is history. The president piece. I'm not a very good spectator, as in I'm an amazing parent spectator, but I'm not. Excuse me, sorry. Amazing parent spectator, but not a great stander buyer. So what that meant was wherever there was an opportunity to get involved at training, I did, and to pick up the co-coach of the under nines with Stu, who's now our under 13s coach. And going into my second year, about to go into my second year on the committee, Stubber pulled me aside one Thursday night, and I thought I was in trouble because it's not very often the president pulls you aside randomly. And he was very open. He said, I think you'd make a great president, and I think, the club needs to sort of shift the way that we were going, and we were a bunch of friends running a club to more of a business type structure, and but obviously not leaving behind the passion and and the community feel. So coming into my fifth year, here we are.
Well, there's 2 points there. I can certainly vouch for that not being good on the sideline because whenever I've had an injury, I find it very hard to watch a game of footy that I'm not playing in or not involved in. But it's great that you have taken the reins as president, and it's clear that the club is in a great upwards direction. So that's a credit to obviously everyone involved, but certainly you and your role. I just wanted to
Appreciate
ask
that.
you, have you ever played AFL football yourself, and what's your career look like?
Yeah, so growing up in Melbourne, it was almost something you were born into, right? So I started playing AFL when it was Vic Kick, so before it went to Auskick, so I'm showing my age. And it was three. You were three when I started, and went through all the junior grades, played a lot of my junior footy at Mitcham Footy Club, which I still have a real fondness to, so still keep up to date with what they're doing. And look, and one of the things that I pulled from the junior side was that sense of community. So my mum was the junior president, was the guy that stood behind the goals and got the footies and cooked the barbecues. And I was very fortunate that that was, a community-based football club. Junior career went up to junior state for Victoria, quite young. I think it was about 13, 14. And that was also back in the days where a 14-year-old would sit on the bench for the resis or, for the under 17s or under 19s. So it was a bit of a baptism of fire, as 14 playing against 19-year-olds. But it was also a really good sense too. So it wasn't, men against boys. It was something that they, really nurtured and developed and sort of fell out of the game after as you do, because when you have kids, naturally they start to come first. And
Mm.
also too, the last 10 years of living down the Bain Basin, we were predominantly a junior based club. It's only been the last couple of years that we've had the men's seniors. So that was sort of what drew me back into it, into football was space to complement our women's senior space. And then I've been lucky again to play a few games for the Narra Vikings when they were around and with Bay and Basin, but I can comfortably say my body is happier either running water or on the sideline.
Nice. So it sounds like from what you're saying that that sense of community in the football club when you were growing up has sort of led you to your morals and values within the footy club you're at now. Would that be correct?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It was something that, I remember as a kid just wanting to be a part of it, all kids crave, sometimes subconsciously we don't even realize it. But so me, I guess as part of this role, it was nitpicking out the things that I really liked and the things that I felt that our club stood for, and and having like-minded people around us in order to do that. Yeah, really allowed us to sort of build that. To your point there, the community space and also that sense of belonging and doing that through AFL footy.
Yeah, nice. I've got a quick question here, and I don't want you to think too hard about it, but describe the Bay and Basin Football Club in 3 words.
I only need one.
Okay.
The first one's inclusive. There is, yeah, and I'll elaborate on that. There's a sense there's something for a club. If I was to add a little bit from two more words, um, another one, and fun. So I'd loop all three of those in, but I think ultimately inclusive is what we stand on.
Just remember, I'm the one asking the questions. You don't get to change the questions around. No, just kidding.
This
Good
is what
answer.
this is what all good diplomats and politicians do.
Very good. All right, so tell me, and I'm sure every day is a bit different, and you're not working 24 hours a day as club president, but sort of give me an idea of what's the daily life of the club president like. You can maybe elaborate a bit on some of the general tasks you might do from week to week to keep the club running, and go from there.
Yeah, I think look, we're somewhat different in how we structured our club. So as a junior and a senior club, we sit under the one club president to having separate seniors and juniors clubs, and that was a deliberate move from us because it allowed us to have a consistent message coming up and a one of the things to your question that is the byproduct of that is it does probably make it for a little bit more involvement because you do have direct oversight of the seniors and the juniors and they don't always align, right? And nor should they. That's all part of the challenge. But
Hmm.
I guess the day to day for me is quite outside of football season and outside of game day, in the sense that there's a lot of politics that happen with football, and is getting, kids and adults both playing the game right and being part of something bigger than just us as a club. But Fridays in the lead up to our home games, I do enjoy doing the line marking. It's something that I find quite therapeutic. It's something that has to happen. People sometimes just think the lines fall out of the sky, which I like to believe that they do. But for me, I do like my own company walking around the oval with the line marking machine. So, the usual bits and pieces that come with it around, there's a lot of phone conversations, there's a lot of WhatsApp movements. It's not something you want to charge by the hour because some weeks you're doing 30 hours and other weeks you're doing three, right? It just depends on what it is.
Yeah.
It's a bit of an all year round gig as well, particularly too because we've got a really successful AFL that runs in the basin. So, that sort of falls under our club wing as well. But Yeah, ultimately it can vary as I want it to, because I do like to get involved on game day to a certain degree as well. Whether that's, supporting the women, from an unofficial or official coaching type role, or if it's around the game manager role on seniors or juniors. Like I said earlier, I'm not a very good spectator, so.
Nice. And just with your line markings, any chance you can make, being a forward myself, could you make the line markings maybe around 35-meter mark, but still call it 50 so that it makes me look like I'm kicking from 50 all the time?
Yeah, I reckon we can do that. We'll also open up the goal square by a couple of meters as well.
Nice one. All right, so I'm looking at your background here in the video, and you've got a number of major sponsors listed up there. My question to you is that I understand that some clubs in Australia have lots and lots of sponsors, and that's for many reasons. But you guys have decided to have five sort of key sponsors, and I just want you to talk me through how you go about selecting sponsors and what the sponsors may mean to the Bay and Basin Football Club.
Yeah, of course. And look, I mean, to the first point was, it's very strategic. So, when I mentioned earlier that when I first took on the president role, it was to look at this from a business perspective. And when I look at business, I think, well, what is something that I want to be? I want to belong. So it was very important for us that when we did go down the sponsorship route, keeping in mind that we are, only our third year into the senior men's, and reforming our women's to have that consistent, week to week on the field. It does cost money to run a football club. Football clubs, particularly community football clubs, shouldn't have to run at a loss. However, it's also really important that when you're aligning yourself with other brands, so there's been a long relationship with the country club, for argument's sake, and it's also, it's quite a positive relationship because it's built more around the community side of things, and how they can help assist us as a club from function room perspective or meeting room perspective, as opposed. Just some of their regulations that they have in New South Wales to give back some of, the gaming revenue. However, it would have been very easy with a pub or the likes, but we genuinely believe that being an inclusive football club, from a seniors and a juniors perspective, that necessarily wasn't where we wanted to align ourselves at this stage.
Hmm.
In relation to, Jervis Bay Mussels, for example, they've been a long-standing supporter of our club in an unofficial capacity. Again, looking at them, how they align with our community is their local business, locals, and also doing it in as much of a sustainable way as possible in what they do and their footprint. And Bendigo Bank was somewhat the same, being a community bank. There was, there's a lot of conversations around banks, and banks are there to make money. But, ultimately, I really loved what Bendigo do in our community, not just for sports, but for, arts, for schools, and for different things. And when Bendigo actually came to us, they basically said to us, look, we really like what you, we like the standing that you've got outside of the football club in our community, and they wanted to be a part of it. So, that was, that's probably with Bendigo. It's the start of a long-term relationship, which is great. Nomads, from the perspective of, it's about, looking at how we can help them, how they can help us. For them, Nomads are a small family business, operating in the area in the retail and food space, which is quite challenging. you know, they were seeing what we were doing as our club and sort of seeing some of the footprints we were making outside of the club and felt that the brands would align very well. So Nomads are as it says in the logo, they're a barbecue, they're a shop, they're external, they're internal. So again, it was around sort of saying, okay, well, here's what we like to align ourselves with as a member of their community and vice versa. And then with the expressive mind, for me, there was a big driver for us to say that, yes, we're inclusive. Yes, we've got a great culture. Yes, we harbour that as best as we possibly can. But how do we double down on that? And we double down on that by linking ourselves with a company that provides mental health support. Not only does that in the paid space, but also from our club perspective, it was part of the community arrangement that we set up with Expressive, which was about, them giving the opportunity to give back to their community and us. Not only do we stand for these certain things, but we believe in them. And this is exactly how we're showing that, not only do we, talk the talk, but this is us walking the walk. So um, they were built around some pillars that we had, and a lot of it was around community, as you can tell, because I've used the word community across nearly all of those sponsors. And, so for me, it was really important to get a really good foundation around our sponsors, not necessarily just to encompass the money that comes with them, because lot of money to run a football club. But this is about long-term relationships and longevity. And, again, saying that not only are we part of a football community, but we're part of a larger community.
Yeah, so it sounds like you could have either reached out yourself or you could have offered out to many businesses, but it was about aligning yourselves with the right people and a small number of people within the community that's to support the club and the club supports them.
Yeah, yeah, and look, and in the sponsorship space, but I would prefer that grows more organically than anything else. There was a number of conversations we had with all of the people in my background, but they were really the conversations were from the businesses wanting to make sure that we are who they felt we are, and also from my perspective and the club's perspective, we're giving across that this is who we are, and we would love you to come on board because this is where we feel you could add value, and it's not the monetary value, it's all the other values that come with it. Albeit we do need sponsors to run clubs, there's
Yeah.
no doubt about it.
Yeah, great. All right. Well, something a little more light-hearted. I mean, all that stuff is great, but I want to get involved in a little bit about people in the footy club, and I'm sure you've grown some great relationships with different people throughout the club, and I'm hoping that you probably got a funny story or two up your sleeve, but can you just sort of tell me someone at the footy club who has made you laugh, and maybe you can think of a story at the footy club that you can tell us it's a bit of a laugh or an experience throughout your time there?
Yeah, that is a good one. I mean, naturally the person that I gravitate when we're talking about stories and we're talking about, culture and we're talking about who we are and what we are, is, Sam Stubbs, right? So everybody's going to say, oh, I know Sammy, or Sammy, or know of Sammy, or you've met Sammy in your own movements. And but look, to be totally honest, where I talk about walking the walk and talk is Sammy embodies all that. I've got probably 1,000 funny stories about Sammy. And so Sammy is a young, fit, strong-willed, strong-minded, strong physical um, man that just happens to live with Down syndrome. Now, the beauty of Sammy is that Sammy doesn't let any of that hold him back. Sammy doesn't use it as an excuse or as a negative, and neither do his parents, and neither does anybody in the football club. By embracing Sammy for who he is, and it's made us a better club. But I think probably the funniest story was, and look, and I hope this is as funny for somebody else as it is in my head. But the very first game where we entered the senior men's competition, Sammy was running and raring to go, and we've managed to get him onto the team, and he was chomping at the bit, and we were down by about 70 points, and out went Sammy. Off he ran out there, and did you enjoy it? And he said, well, you know what? He said, they can't cook and they can't clean. And that's been the motto of Sammy for the last 2 years is every time somebody's lining up to kick a goal, it's can't cook, can't clean. And so I mean, that just embodies who he is, right? Like it's just something so simple, something so cool. To him, it meant a lot, and it's something that's stuck with him. But yeah, look, I could have 1,000 stories on the club. I mean, they all base around that, right? They all base around, that lightheartedness, the comedy piece. Probably the other key moment for me as a club president was the lead up to our 2023 season, where I had a 5-year plan where I felt that we would get a senior men's based on the popularity of nines and all the rest of it. Um, but we decided to pull that trigger after 3 years, and it was an amazing response. Originally, after Chris, us having a pre-season, and then come the second week of the pre-season in January, Stubber and I decided that it was a good idea to put on a barbecue and just have a couple of quiet drinks in after sort of a meet and greet. And we ended up having that meet and greet and quiet session with myself and Chance. That was it. So that turned out to be an absolute panic stations. We didn't think we'd make a scene forward. 3 months later, we had 30 guys ready to go in the paddock. So yeah, I've got a few. I've got a few, but they just revolve around that lightheartedness and seeing footy for what it is, right? It's fun, it's funny, and it's belonging.
And going back to that word you used before, inclusive or inclusion, that seems to be a big talking point at the footy club. And I believe there's been some rule changes of recent times within the last couple of years around the inclusion of players with disabilities. Can you just quickly tell me a bit about that and what that's meant for the Basin Footy Club fielding a team and having those sort of players involved?
Yeah, yeah. Look, that's to be totally. If Stubber and I speak for Stubber in this because we've had multiple conversations about this. If this is what we're known around inclusiveness, and this is what we're remembered for from the Basin perspective, then I'll be happy. But as part of the introduction to us playing senior football, again, when we're talking about inclusiveness and going back to Sam, we felt it was very important that Sam had a safe place to call his own and to be part of the team. And, the guys and girls matter were absolutely incredible in embracing Sam and taking him along the journey as he took them along his. And so we managed to get him onto the 22 and he went on and played a number of games in the first year. After Stubber and I had some conversations, we felt it really important that we tried to make this a little bit more official. And Stubber led this, so I can't take full credit for it. But from a club perspective, we backed it 1,000%. And basically, what it meant was that from an AFL perspective, from as much as we can understand from what we've been told, we're actually the first AFL club in Australia to actually and it's called the inclusion sub. So the idea of it is that as a club, we can name 23 where you can normally only name 22. And Sammy is named as our 23rd player every week. Now, he doesn't act as a super sub. He can interchange the same as anyone else can. So for those of you who understand footy, you'll understand what that means. For those who don't so much, a lot of the times in the super sub scenario, once a person comes off and the sub and can't come back on. So we floated the idea to the AFL with the support of the club and the whole committee and generally the playing group as well. And it was met with a great reception. So it allowed us after we filled out a lot of paperwork and the likes to have Sam named every week, but also to being trialled in our South Coast competition. It was also opened up to the other clubs competing, so their opinions were sought originally. And we believe that we're still going to look at this for national implementation, which is, for a little club from the South Coast, just doing our own thing. We think we're a great club, and I'm the first person to say that. But, I think this shows that, again, when we're talking about walking the walk, this is who we are, and this is the impact that we're trying to make on people's lives. And so to see that as being the first club, across that space to have an inclusion sub with the intention of, the piloting and the trialing of this over the next last year and this year. It just says to me that, A, the club's in the right space, and B, yes, there's always things that we want to improve on, but, to be continually challenging where we're at, for the good of the game and for the good of the people, it was nice. It's a really nice feeling.
Yeah, that is super cool. And I mean, this interview is not about me, but I certainly just want to jump in on that, being that being an AFL umpire of recent times in the South Coast League, being around the Basin Club in the past, it you can really tell the feeling around when I was there, when I saw Sam kick a goal. I'm not sure if that was his first goal, but I've seen him kick a goal. And also when I think it was 100 games he played of recent times, you could just see how much it meant to not only Sam, but the rest of the community that were there. Supporting him and supporting this culture of inclusion in the game. So, from my perspective, I found that very heartwarming, and I'm sure that's a great feeling for you guys as a club as well.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, and look, and what what Sam and the community get, we give it what we give. Sorry, we get back tenfold. With having, Sam and anybody who buys into our culture and wants to be part of our club and part of the culture that we set. And and to be fair, sometimes that journey of that culture is potentially not aligned with everyone. That's okay, because we like to think that where we're going is the right way. We're seeing it in the community. So yeah, very, very fortunate. But yeah, I mean, Sam was also the first player to ever mark up 100 games for the Bombers too, which was quite fitting.
Yeah, that's really cool. Um, Here's a question for you. If you could recruit any AFL or AFLW player to come to the Bombers, and it doesn't have to be the best player, but when you're watching people, you hear the players in the media speaking as well. You also get a bit of a vibe of what their morals and values are and what they see as important. Just have a quick think about one of those players that you would think would be a good fit for the Bay and Basin Bombers. I'm sure all of them would be considering their skills and the fact that they're paid athletes, but just picking someone who you might think would be great down at the Bombers that you'd like to see in a Bombers jersey, even if it was for one game or 100 games.
Yeah, look, my mind went straight to Hawthorn because I'm a Hawthorn tragic, and that's just my own selfishness of wanting to hang out with some Hawks players. But I think, look, and if we're going along a former player, I think just the aura that a Lance Franklin brings, purely in his aura and and the longevity and and particularly what he's doing now in the space for Indigenous players, in the background. I think that'll be a good one. Probably a modern day player, and and those of you who do know me will know that I'm not a Sydney Swans fan by any means. But Isaac Heaney is probably a good one. I think he brings a lot of values around, how a club is, who a club becomes based on actions, based on words. Um, yeah, I mean, you could bring in any of them based on their salary and their expectations of what they bring to the club. But I would definitely go past the football part, and look at what they would bring to us as a whole club.
Yeah, nice, nicely answered.
Good question though, because that one puts you on the spot.
It does. There's a couple of those questions, but we only got a few to go. But I want you to think about the canteen. Now, as an umpire, I've been down there, and I know the canteen is open most of the time when games are on and stuff. I just want you to think about this. What is probably the most popular item that sells in a canteen now? And if you could put any item into the canteen, to be a crowd pleaser, what would you pick?
So when you're talking canteens, there's two totally different canteens. There's your juniors and there's your seniors, right? So in a junior space, your most popular is your bag of lollies by a mile. Lisa, our vice president, goes to a hell of a lot of trouble to bag all those up and put them all together. And then we sell them at the right price, which is about $1, I think. I think generally your most popular canteen item is a pie on a cold day, and probably a can of Coke or a Gatorade or a Powerade on a hot day. But um, sorry, did you ask if there was anything I could put in there? What would it be? Is that
Yes, I did.
so? For me, it'd be hot roast rolls.
Oh, yes. Okay.
So that would be, and look, at given a sponsor a plug, that would be some Nomad's brisket with some gravy on a nice soft roll. So.
Yeah. So are you saying that you're working towards that for this season, or are you just saying that that's something you'd love?
So my own self would absolutely love it. I think there's a lot of opportunity for growth in, when we're talking about canteens and stuff like that, because they are a bit of a lifeblood of community football, not only from a income perspective, but they are a nice part of the football environment. So The key though is to always keep things as simple as possible. We've found that over the years is the more complicated we get, the harder it is. And in that sense, we're relying on volunteers to instigate all this stuff too, right? For the most
Mm.
part around serving. So, but yeah, I think let's go watch this space and see where we can get to.
Sounds good, but I also, as a senior player, love a lolly bag, so please don't count that out for the
There we
seniors
go.
canteen too, you know.
There we go.
Um,
Feedback taken on board.
so look, in like high end sport, so NRL and AFL, sometimes they tend to have like club mottos or people dressed up in, like if it's the Geelong Cats, they'll have a person dressed up as a cat or whatever. If the Bombers were to have their own version of that, what would it look like? And could you pick a potential person from the club who you think would be great inside the outfit?
Yeah, another good one. I mean, you would go straight to some sort of fighter jet in the shape of our logo. You would naturally go to, but I think just to sort of change that up a little bit, the GWS logo is this big strong guy in a GWS kit. I would probably liken it more to the average body shape.
Yep.
Albeit the average superhero, right? I think we've got a lot of different people who would do really well in that suit. In the junior space, I would probably call out maybe Andrew, who's one of our junior coordinators and coaches.
Yeah.
Bush is a bit of a character, so he would fit that well. From the seniors, I think Jack Allen, one of our young guys, one of our young leaders, would wear it beautifully. Because I've seen the way that he interacts with people, and he's happy to hold other people's kids, and he doesn't mind getting dribbled on. So, you've got to find the right person for that sort of role. So it would be the average everyday superhero in a Bombers jersey, I'd say.
Well, hopefully those two guys you just singled out will watch this video and get a bit of a laugh out of that. So,
Absolutely.
and I just we're going to finally end on a bit of a light-hearted one. But if your team, as in the Bay and Basin Bombers, juniors and seniors, were to sum up your leadership style in the form of an animal, what do you think they'd describe you as?
Uh, a teddy bear. A teddy bear. It's
Uh,
a but the one that sort of looks a bit like a grizzly bear. I'm the biggest softie you'll ever meet, and I think that shows in the leadership, in the sense that when I say softie, it's around empathy. I feel I lead with empathy. So, but I also, um, don't have any trouble making a tough decision or having a conversation when we have to. But I think physically they would probably say some form of bear, but an all growl no bite type.
so not like the teddy bear Ted from the movie that swears and drinks and carries on, not that version.
No, probably more like the Care Bear version where they shoot rainbows and
Nice one. All right. Well, I just wanted to thank you for taking the time. I know it's Sunday and you've got family and responsibilities, but thanks for taking the time. I'm sure the people viewing this video will get a greater understanding about who the club president is, what they do, and some things they probably didn't know about you. It's great for people to know. So I appreciate your time, Michael. Thank you
no,
very
thanks for
much.
having me. Thanks for having me. It's great to be a part of it, and I'll be really interested for people to call out what their thoughts are on my answers in the comments when this gets uploaded to our socials. Tell me, am I a teddy bear or am I one of them cuddly huggy bears with the rainbows coming out of their hands? So
Maybe
thanks for having
maybe
me.
I'll have to add that question to the player ones once they've had a chance to watch your video and see what they think.
That's great. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Michael.